What's up, guys? Sorry for the technical difficulties. This is my third attempt. It says you can't turn your phone while recording. Okay. Well, I just did. So, if you guys can see this, holla at me. I think I'm live. What's up, guys? It is April 14th, 2018. This is Counterculture, episode 23. This is my podcast. If you guys are watching the Facebook rebroadcast, please forward to minute 3. If you are watching the Facebook rebroadcast, please forward to minute 3. See, I'm using 3 fingers. 1, 2, 3. What's up, Steve Dennison? How are you doing, brother? What's up, George? What's happening? Thanks for joining me, guys. We're dropping bombs last night. That's why I'm on the Facebook today. Today's title, again, everything will be official here shortly. Today's title is Trump launched World War and the silence proves Americans are getting played. Trump launched World War and the silence proves Americans are getting played. This is episode 23, guys. My name is Aaron Lujan. This is Counterculture. This is my hobby, my podcast. If you guys don't know, this is available on all the major podcast players. It's on iTunes. It's on Stitcher. It's on iHeartRadio. We are also on aaronlujan.com. That's where everything sits. You done messed up, Aaron. AARONLUJAN.com is the web address. You guys can catch all the videos and podcasts there. I appreciate the support. As I mentioned, please forward to minute 3 for the rebroadcast. And Matthew Tishammer, what's up, brother? One of these days, I'm going to add one of you guys on there, and you guys are going to join me in the broadcast. And we'll talk it out. Eventually, there's going to be video. I'm going to have guests. I'm going to have a better background than this. I don't know. It looks like I'm in a Chinese restaurant or something. So we're at the 2-minute and 11 mark. Drinking signature black coffee. About to get this party started. As I mentioned, forward to minute 3 if you're watching the Facebook rebroadcast. The bills are paid by prepsave.com. If you guys are not prepared for the worst, go to prepsave.com. Get your storable foods and your waters. Putin is telling his people to do the very same thing. 20 seconds. T-minus 20 seconds. Is today April 14th? I hope so. Better be. I don't know. I should probably check, right? Yes, here we go. Welcome. Today is April 14th, 2018. You are listening to Counterculture with Aaron Lujan. Today's podcast is titled Trump Launched World War and the Silence Proves Americans Are Getting Played. Thank you for joining me, guys. My name is Aaron Lujan. You can catch everything at aaronlujan.com. We are on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, all the major podcast players. We're on the YouTubes, trying to get all across the internets. Please share this with your friends, guys, trying to get the message out. Yesterday night, 4 a.m. Syria time, 9 p.m. Eastern time, bombs, missiles, airstrikes from aircraft and from naval carriers were launched in and around Damascus, Syria, at the order of the President of the United States. 103 missiles, 71 were destroyed by anti-ballistic artillery on the ground. Missiles were dropped near Homs, Messiah, and Damascus, Syria. U.S. claims that they hit Scientific Research Center, chemical weapons storage facility, and a storage facility command post near Homs. I would have liked to have titled it, but the title was too long. Trump illegally and immorally dropped and ordered missiles on a country. See, we live in the United States and we have a constitution, and in Article 1, Section 8, only the Congress of the United States, the people that represent us, are authorized to declare war. Which our president did yesterday was illegal. I know a precedent has been set by then George W. Bush shortly after 2001, probably way before that, I'm sure, that the president can go ahead and unilaterally, illegally wage war or declare war. That's illegal. That's an impeachable crime. So what I wanted to do today is briefly explain what happened last night and then explain why this was ordered. There was a alleged chemical attack last week. I'm going to go in and explain why Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, is not guilty or it's improbable for him to have done this. It defies logic. It defies a lot of the evidence that's being presented. And then I'm going to explain to you why would the United States declare a strike if they were aware or had suspicion that Bashar al-Assad was not guilty of gassing his own people. What we Americans need to do in response to this, what's actually being done and what I expect to happen as a consequence of these actions, and what does that say about us as Americans. So we know yesterday around 9 o'clock, these missiles were getting fired off of aircraft and off of naval destroyers, apparently. This was announced by the president in response to April 7th's alleged chemical attack in the area of Douma, Syria. That's the eastern area of the country. Just to kind of give you guys some background, if you haven't been paying very much attention, just a couple years ago in the Obama administration, jihadi forces, ISIS, al-Nusra, Islamic terrorist groups entered Syria and started occupying territory. And we've been in a multi-year war where supposedly the United States has been fighting these terrorists with Bashar al-Assad and Russia. Russia has been supporting as an ally to Bashar al-Assad's Syrian National Army against these terrorist organizations. And these terrorist organizations are unified with Iran, as well as Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations. So that's kind of where we have been these last couple of years. There's been this effort for Syria to fall, the secular government led by Bashar al-Assad, where women can drive and Christians can go to church and women can go to universities and they can watch Snapchat and Instagram, and they're surrounded by nations where very little of that exists now. Most of the countries throughout the Middle East are controlled by what I would call savages, people who are ascribed to Wahhabism, Wahhabist Islam. And it's a complete mess in the Middle East with very few exceptions, Syria being one of them. Syria's been fighting for their freedom for the last couple of years. And just recently, they have been winning the war and are, for all intents and purposes, have won the war. Over 90% of Syria has been recaptured by Syrian national forces allied with Bashar al-Assad. And in these communities, he's well respected. He's got one of the highest approval ratings in the free world. If you talk to anybody who's from Syria or lives in Syria, knows full well that most of these jihadi forces are backed by the U.S. And so U.S. is kind of playing this PR game where they say they're fighting terrorists, but in reality, they're funding, financing, and training the forces that are fighting Syrian army. So that's kind of where we're at. So let's go ahead and review what happened last week. Last week, April 7th, there was a alleged chlorine attack. There has been reported 40 to 70 killed. 500 have been treated with injuries. Apparently, this took place in the eastern part of the country in an area called Douma, which happens to be controlled by jihadis, terrorist groups, namely Jaish al-Islam, which is the equivalent of Al-Qaeda or the equivalent of al-Nusra. These are jihadi terrorist groups. This is one of the very last bastions of Syria that is still under the control of terrorist forces. So it's important to understand that, because where this alleged attack took place is an area that was controlled or is under the control of the enemy, under the control of these jihadi forces. So apparently this chemical attack took place, chlorine gas attack. There's video supposedly of children suffocating. They're having problems breathing, foaming at the mouth, burning of the eyes. The Organization of the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the OPCW, is a international group that was tasked to go and do the inspection in Syria today, Saturday, April 14th, but obviously the evidence has all been destroyed as a result of the missiles and bombings yesterday. So that's what happened last week. Yesterday was supposedly the response to that. It was initially announced via Twitter by the president, and then out as a surprise, really without any members of Congress being briefed and very little media fanfare. Bombs started to drop over Damascus. Damascus is a major city with hundreds of thousands of people living in that ancient town, ancient city. So this, as far as we know, we don't have any official numbers of any civilian deaths, but that's really, really dangerous to be dropping missiles over Los Angeles, over Dallas. This is a major city. Imagine what that would be like to have Tomahawk missiles dropping in and around the suburbs of Dallas, Texas, or Denver, Colorado. So that's what is being reported thus far. In short, the West, the President of the United States, has said Bashar al-Assad is guilty of gassing his own people. And as a result, the United States has a moral obligation to diminish Assad's ability to wage war. Now, why would Assad do that? My point that I want to make here is it is completely illogical. Assad, as I mentioned a moment ago, for all intents and purposes, has already won the war. Over 90% of his nation has been recaptured by his military. Just a few weeks ago, Trump made an announcement that we were going to pull out of Syria and that it was no longer an official policy of the United States for regime change in Syria. So if you're about to win the war and the U.S. is about to go home and you've everything but captured your entire country, why in the world would you gas your own people and have your people turn on you and have the international community essentially call you a murderer and animal, as Trump did, and then have the whole world turn on you and give them justification to take you out of power and basically revert all of the progress that you just made? Does not make any logical sense. Secondly, it's very suspicious that the attack took place in the area that is not controlled by Bashar al-Assad. It is controlled by the enemy, by this Jaish al-Islam. Syrian army liberated, let me back up. What's also suspicious is just recently in Syrian national news and a lot of the news in the Middle East, news that wasn't getting reported here in the United States, is that when the Syrian army liberated the town of Ghouta, they found a chemical lab that was controlled by Jaish al-Islam in a Jaish al-Islam building, where they found chemical weapons that were from Saudi Arabia, which is a U.S. ally. And on March 17th, RT, Russian television, reported of evidence showing that the United States was training Syrians in false flag chemical attacks. This was reported on March 17th. And also very bizarre, we're starting to see a pattern that last April, if you guys remember, Trump had only been in office for a short period of time. It was accused that Assad, the head of Syria, had used sarin gas on his own people, and we bombed him as a result. And it was just right after the time when when Trump had made the announcement back then that regime change and overthrowing Assad was no longer on the table. So for the second time in Trump's presidency, when it appears that policy is shifting to not overthrow Assad, he's immediately accused of of inflicting his own people with a chemical attack. Very, very suspicious pattern. Russia has also claimed, quote, irrefutable evidence that the attack was staged. They point to a NGO known as the White Helmets. And this group in the media has been positioned as a humanitarian group, a lovey-dovey butterfly rainbow type group, NGO. They're just there to help the innocents. And they've been caught on video actually staging events. Look it up on YouTube, type White Helmets stage events. This is the very group that the Pentagon and Western media has been pointing to as, quote, evidence that Assad launched a chemical attack on his own people. Does not make any sense, again, that Assad would wage a chemical attack on his own people when he's winning the war, and everything that he had been fighting for has all but won. Why would he launch a chemical attack on his own people and encourage the international community to turn on him in light of what I just shared? The evidence that we're pointing to is from a group that's been staging events. Chemical facilities have been uncovered with chemicals from U.S. allies. The chemical attack took place in an area that was controlled by this Jaish al-Islam, not controlled by Bashar al-Assad's forces. And we don't have any real hardcore evidence because this inspection from the OPCW was supposed to take place today, Saturday, April 14th. We obviously can no longer conduct that investigation because the crime scene is now a giant crater in the earth, probably from missiles and bombs. Coffee break. So I don't believe Assad did it. It's looking like it's a staged event. It's looking like a false flag. If you study history, throughout history, let's just go back to the old days of way back in 2003 when we said Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, and we went into Iraq, and now it's public evidence that there was no WMDs, and Iraq had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. But 1 million Iraqis died anyways, and billions of dollars were spent, and Iraq is still in a tailspin controlled by a bunch of jihadi, crazy, wacko animals. And here we are today with the exact same story. Bashar al-Assad, without any evidence, with all this suspicious activity, just out of the blue, decided to gas his people. And we have the President of the United States illegally, Donald Trump illegally launched a war in Syria. Which leads me to my fourth point. Why is Syria then under fire? So if Bashar al-Assad didn't gas his own people, then why are we going to war with Syria? What interests does the United States have in destroying Bashar al-Assad and taking him out of power? Well, it's been an ongoing policy of the United States, if you study, even just going back to the year 2000, to completely destabilize the Middle East. And what I mean by destabilize is take countries that are stable, that have stable economies, currencies, there's general peace and general prosperity, and turn them into, the type of Iraq we saw, like in the last couple of years, where they're putting Christians in cages and setting people on fire, and women can't drive, and throwing homosexuals off roofs, and, just barbarism, 600 AD type stuff, because that's that's how Saudi Arabia rules. If you look at the Saudi Arabian constitution, most of their justice system is based in middle century civilization. So Syria happens to be one of those few countries that actually has some first world prosperity. Bashar al-Assad is an eye surgeon, educated in the West. He's married to a British woman. He leads a country where he's got one of the highest approval ratings of any leader of any nation state in the world. Women have equal rights in Syria. You can live a homosexual lifestyle, not get thrown off a roof for it. Christians can go to church without fear of persecution. There's prosperity, there's spas. Damascus is a happening city. It's a place that is like an oasis in the Middle East, unlike all of the countries that they're surrounded by. So what interest does the United States have then in destabilizing the U.S.? Well, like I mentioned, it's an ongoing policy to control the oil. If you look at the Middle East, it's rich with oil. Every single time we overthrow a nation, it's put in power by these religious dictators, obviously Islamic ones. And they hand over the big oil contracts and rule with an iron fist, and pretty much everyone's persecuted, and the oil companies and the multinational corporations get to run amok. Just look at Iraq. Just look at Libya. Hillary Clinton's State Department destabilized Libya. It is now being under the control of groups that have handed oil contracts, I think primarily to BP. You look at Iraq. Same story. It was run by Saddam Hussein. He was very similar to Syria. There was a lot of prosperity. Iraq didn't have terrorists. That's the thing. Iraq did not have a terror problem prior to the U.S. invasion. Now it's just a hotbed for Wahhabism and radical Islam, or I should say fundamental Islam, because Islam is fundamentally radical. So the reality is that every single time the United States goes into a country that's run by a secular leader where there's general stability, they're overthrown under the pretext of weapons of mass destruction and chemical weapons and the bad guy. And they get overthrown and there's a vacuum and they're taken over by Wahhabist radical jihadis. And it happened in Libya, it happened in Iraq, it happened in Egypt after the Arab Spring, and here we are again in Syria, where Bashar al-Assad is now the bad guy. So that's what I believe is at play. Not to mention just the oil, war is big business. You have a multi-billion-dollar industry known as the military-industrial complex that makes lots of money in war, and they don't do well in peace times. On Friday, 48 hours ago, I believe. What is that, 24 hours? I don't know. I went to Catholic school, so my math is really, really bad. Friday to Saturday is 24 hours. That's right. Raytheon stocks opened up higher on Friday. $1 billion increase in market capitalization. Boeing, BA, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics. Each one of those weapons of war manufacturers rose in stock as much as 1%, collectively $5 billion in market capitalization. $5 billion, guys. It's a big business. Guess who owns the media companies? NBC is owned by General Electric, I think, still. These groups are in bed with each other. So that is why I believe they went into Syria. So now what I want to go into next is what are the consequences of these actions. So Donald Trump broke the law on Friday. High crimes and misdemeanors, although I think it's just a high crime, right? Going to war. What's going to happen now? Well, Russia's already promised consequences. Let me quote Antonov, the U.S. ambassador from Russia, quote, "A pre-designed scenario is being implemented. Again, we are being threatened. We warn that such actions will not be left without consequence. The United States, the possessor of the biggest arsenal of chemical weapons, has no moral right to blame other countries. You guys, Russia is a superpower. Russia is a nuclear superpower. This isn't the 19-year-old Wahhabist hiding in a cave from the Marine Corps. This is a serious nation with a serious military that can have very dire consequences for the world. Syria is the last country in the Middle East where Christians can actually survive. Many Americans aren't aware of the tyranny and the oppression that's going on against people of faith in the Middle East. You cannot follow Jesus in the Middle East, generally speaking, without it being illegal. Syria is one of those places, and it has become a refuge, my understanding, of people of faith from other countries who are being persecuted going into Syria. If Syria falls, guys, we're going to witness a genocide of Christians akin to perhaps what we saw in the Holocaust with Jews in Germany. American military deaths, direct conflict with Russia is going to put U.S. men and women on the battlefield with Russian forces. Hundreds of billions of dollars will be spent on this war. You guys, our economy is just starting to kick back up, kinda. Do we really have hundreds of billions of dollars to spend to avenge Assad for a supposed chemical attack? How about we mind our own business, and how about we use that money to fix our own country? I know that sounds like a tired argument, but it has to be said. 1.45 million per Tomahawk missile. 1.45 million every time it's launched. Just one missile. That's crazy to me. Think about what we could do with $1.5 million. We're dropping bombs in and around highly populated areas of a country that never did anything to us. Those poor Syrian people. Have you guys thought about that? I mean, does Russia have the right to launch missile airstrikes on Austin and San Diego when the FBI and the ATF fired on American citizens in Waco, Texas? That was the U.S. government on video killing its own citizens. If we're going to follow that logic, then does Russia have that right to bomb San Diego? I don't think so. I think Russia needs to respect our sovereignty, and it's up to us to deal with our own problems. I don't think Russia has a right to bomb U.S. cities when our government harms its own people. The economy is going to tank. It's going to affect you. It's going to affect me. We have a moral obligation to oppose war. Man, I miss the anti-war left. Where have you guys been? Our name and our treasure are on the line if we go to war. It's going to be an American flag. You know, my grandparents' generation fought Nazis in Germany in World War II because they were the bad guys and we were the good guys. Are we still the good guys? Hitler launched a preemptive strike and invaded nations. Trump yesterday launched a preemptive strike, and we've already invaded nations. America, what path are we on? Where are we going with this? Who have we become? You know, those are some of the questions that I think we need to ask ourselves right now. Next point is, well, what do we do next? How do we respond? Because obviously war, even if Assad, let's just assume theoretically speaking that Assad did gas his own people. Does that mean we go to war? No. Maybe it means we impose international pressure. A point was made the other day by another blogger that said Yemen has been starving children. They can't eat food. Little kids in Yemen can't eat food. The Yemenis government's been starving their kids. We don't do anything about that. We're picking and choosing. This is selective illegal war. You know, we have no moral ground to stand on. So if we're not going to go to war with Yemen and their ally, and because their aggressor Saudi Arabia, which is our ally, and we're selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, maybe that's the reason why we're not going to war with Yemen. But if we're not going to go to war and free the Yemenis people, why are we going to go to war against Syria because they're hurting their own people? There's no consistency. So even if, my point is even if Assad gassed his own people, we have no moral ground to, or argument to make, or ground to stand on to go to war and strike Syria. So what do we do next? Well, Trump is done, man. It doesn't even matter, really, in my opinion, anything that he has led us to this point. The minute you break the law and the minute you violate your oath of office, and is something as grave as waging an illegal war against a sovereign nation, a nation that never attacked you, and you declare war as the President of the United States, which is illegal under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, because war has to be declared by Congress, we need to impeach this guy. These are grounds for impeachment. We need to see him go. We need to take back our country. Didn't Trump campaign on we need to bring our country back? Wasn't this the same president who criticized President Obama for going into all of these countries? So he's exposed himself as a hypocrite, and his actions are indefensible. I don't know how many civilians were killed yesterday. I hope none. But his actions yesterday could lead to a lot of suffering and a lot of death. And what he did was immoral, and what he did was illegal. And America, we have the ability, and we have a unique opportunity, because there's a whole sector of the population who already hates this guy, which leads me to my next point. What has been the reaction? How has the Trump haters and the left responded? How has the Trump train and the Make America Great Again crew responded to this? You know how? That's how. Silence. 80 members of Congress wrote to Trump yesterday reminding him, you need prior congressional authorization, bud. Nothing of significance in the mainstream media. Listen to some of these, some conservative commentators, some pastors who have been pro-Trump, and some are defending his actions, and some are staying silent. Shame on you guys. You've exposed yourself as being fake conservatives. And where is the anti-war left? Where is all of the Trump haters? You know where they are? They're planning over 800 protests against Trump, not for the war, if Trump fires Mueller and Rosenstein. Because we're late into 2018, and supposedly he's working with the Russians to win the election. He's starting a war with Russia. And the left is concerned about the Russia investigation, the investigation that never was. You guys, what does this say? What does this say about America? Well, what it says about the left, in my opinion, is that you guys are controlled. You'll only go out there if you're told. You're only going to criticize and demonize Trump if you're given permission to. You're getting played. Conservatives, you voted for Trump because you said that he was going to bring the troops home, because he was critical of all these wars, because he was going to bring the economy back. And many of you liked the fact that he was opposed to the Iraq war, and many of you liked the fact that he was opposed to all of Obama's illegal wars and foreign intervention. You're silent. You know what that says about you guys? You guys aren't for real. You're not principled. So this episode of 23 is just a call for us to have some principles again, take off our jerseys, red, blue, and just unite around some really basic American principles like war is bad, especially when it's unconstitutional. And nobody is above the law in America, even if it's your guy. Remember when the conservatives hated all of Obama's unconstitutional craziness? Because it was. Obama was an enemy of the Constitution. And Trump gave the big inauguration speech about he was going to restore law and order. Well, that's out the window. So here's a really unique opportunity for unity. Would the left, who absolutely hates Trump, and will the right, who claims to be principled and be conservative, will they join up and oppose this action and at least tell the president to sit down and know your role? You're not supposed to wage war. It's authorized by Congress, not by you. I hope so, but that's why I say America is getting played. This whole left-right, Republican-Democrat division is used when it's convenient for the powers that be. The powers that be obviously want to go to war. They want to dethrone Syria. So the left ain't going after Trump for this, and the right's staying quiet. And here I am in the sandwich in my little podcast saying, wake up, guys. Let's have some principles. Let's oppose the war. Let's not go to the streets over an attorney and some Washington Politico and some fake investigation about Russia and an election that has already been won 2 years ago almost. And let's actually be serious adults and let's oppose the destruction of innocent people. Let's oppose spending hundreds of billions of dollars that we don't have. Let's oppose having our brave young men and women die on the battlefield. Let's oppose the slaughter and genocide of Christians across the Middle East. And let's oppose terrorism. Russia has been bombing the hell out of ISIS and Wahhabist forces for years, okay? They have an obligation to defend Syria. What Trump and the United States military did yesterday was illegal, immoral, and unacceptable. And you and I are the only ones that stand in between World War III with 2 nuclear powers, and that's it. Because all the other countries have been impoverished. We're the only last free nation, true free nation on earth. So it's just a call for peace, guys. It's a call to stop the war. Do your research. The media is joining. Republicans and Democrats in Washington are unifying for war. You know, it's really scary when the mainstream media and Republican and Democratic politicians unify under one thing. It's usually a bad sign, a very bad sign. Isn't it a little weird that Trump can drop bombs on a country and the anti-Trump media isn't very critical of it? You know why? They've probably been told, you got to go along with this one. You're going to have to agree with Trump on this one. So I encourage the left and all you people who hate this president, look around you. Think about this. You're probably getting played. You're really going to go to the streets for Rosenstein and Mueller? What about these kids? What about these poor people in Syria that just want to go to school and have a family and have a life? Isn't that more important than some stupid political Washington drama that's unfolding about some investigation? Shouldn't we care about people? I mean, I feel like many of us have just gotten brainwashed. So anyways, guys, this has gone way too long. Thank you for listening. This is therapy for me. I would do it if nobody was listening. This was episode 23. The title of today's episode was Trump Launched World War and the Silence Proves Americans Are Getting Played. AaronLujan.com, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, all the major podcast players. If you're not prepared, go to prepsave.com. Thank you.